Why do I care about some silly little statues coming down or some silly little street names changing? Why do I care? These questions were used by a Venezuelan actress named Elizabeth Rogliani while describing her views on why Confederate statues should not be taken down. Although Confederate statues may be viewed as representations of the negative aspects of American history, and only 47% of U.S. registered voters believe they should remain on public display, their removal may be harmful to the well-being of the nation and should be stopped. In this speech, I will give 4 reasons why Confederate statues should not be torn down. One reason that Confederate statues should not be taken down is because that statues represent history. The lessons the monuments are meant to teach are diminished if the monuments are taken out of public display and moved to museums. The knowledge of history is important because it helps to prevent the reoccurrence of the events that occurred in the past. A professor of anthropology at Indiana University named Lawrence A. Kusner states, removing Confederate statues amounts to whitewashing our history, turning our heads away from the inconvenient truths of our past. We should let them stand and use them to remind ourselves of what we are and are not, the cost our forebears paid for our freedom, and to educate our children. This quote shows that statues can be used to educate future generations about mistakes made in the past, including slavery. Confederate statues should not be taken down because they represent history and can be used to teach future generations about the past. Second reason that Confederate monuments should not be taken down is because the removal of Confederate statues has included the removal of statues that only some people find offensive, while the majority of people would not find them offensive. Where does it end? During the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, monuments of presidents of the United States were also taken down, including George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Ulysses S. Grant. Some people believe that they should not be memorialized because they had ties to slavery, but the 3 presidents were influential in other areas of their presidencies. George Washington led the Continental Army, held the country together during his 2 terms as the first president of the United States, and resisted demands for him to be king. Thomas Jefferson was the author of 2 principles of the United States, equality and freedom, and also was an abolitionist. Ulysses S. Grant came from an abolitionist family, freed the only slave he owned, supported Black men enlisted in the army, and led the Union in the Civil War. Confederate statues should not be taken down because they included the removal of statues that represented people that only some people view as offensive, while the majority don't find them offensive. The third reason that Confederate monuments should not be removed is because monuments are not put up to memorialize the bad actions taken by the people being depicted, but the good actions that the people took. Some people disagree with this argument because they focus on the negative aspects of the people being represented. But monuments of dictators remain because of actions taken that helped the people they ruled over. For example, the town named Latina, built by Benito Mussolini in 1932, was described as a living fascist monument, but still offers tours that detail the good things that came with fascism, including the drainage of swamps, getting rid of malaria, and the distribution of land to peasants and settlers. The meanings of monuments change over time with the change of political values, aesthetic tastes, and historical interpretations. Erecting monuments was a way of grieving for the large number of Confederate soldiers who died in the Civil War. According to the article Monumental Battles, Why We Build Memorials, memorialization is an act in the present that expresses our debt to the past and our gift to the future. This shows that monuments are used to preserve the memory of influential people in the history of the nation. Confederate statues should not be removed because the statues were set up to memorialize the good actions taken by the people being represented. A fourth reason that monuments should not be taken down is because they are symbols of culture, and the destruction of the monuments represents the destruction of culture. Elizabeth Rogliani shared her experience in Venezuela. A socialist leader, Hugo Chavez, tore down statues, changed street names, changed the curriculum taught in schools, and banned certain movies on certain TV stations. According to the article Tearing Down Statues of Real Heroes, Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters have been targeting what they deem to be offensive statues: Christopher Columbus, George Washington, Robert E. Lee, etc. The group called Black Lives Matter shares a goal with all revolutionaries: demoralize the historic majority by demonizing its heroes and ancestors and its history, symbols, monuments, and even flag, so that the majority believes its social order is unjust and permits its destruction. The Black Lives Matter group targeted statues of Christopher Columbus and Father Junipero Serra because they were genocidal racists who murdered and exploited natives. They targeted monuments of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson because they organized a society built on slavery, as well as statues of Robert E. Lee because he fought to keep blacks enslaved. The destruction of American heroes and symbols is a method being used to impose a new narrative that will justify a totalitarian regime. Confederate statues should not be torn down because they represent the culture, and the destruction of statues represents the destruction of culture. In conclusion, monuments are a part of American culture, and their removal of them should not be allowed because their destruction would represent the destruction of American history and culture. Monuments are important because they can be used to teach future generations about mistakes made in the past. Zachary Fine observes that the statue of Lee, like many monuments, does not simply recall the historical figure, but reminds us of the unjust conditions from which it came. We desperately need our monuments to summon that side of history in the struggle against racial injustice today. Thank you.